good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session, Preparing for the Next Generation of Leadership, Succession Planning in Law. Succession planning is one of the most important and often the most overlooked topics in today's legal landscape. Whether you're leading a large firm, you're managing a boutique practice, or you're approaching a transition yourself, having a proactive plan in place is essential for ensuring continuity, protecting clients, and building long-term stability. I'm Randi Bean, the CEO and founder of Life After Law. And I have to say that today's topic feels a little bit full circle for me. When I started Life After Law 25 years ago, occasionally people would ask me, "Oh, is this a company for retiring lawyers? Life After Law." And I actually laughed because I never really thought about it that way at the time. And I'd say, no, no, no. And I tell them what we did, that we do recruitment for lawyers moving into non-traditional and executive roles and in-house counsel and private practice and so forth. And I'd go on to explain how life after law, the after can mean life after law school, life after law firm, life after law practice, law career, and so forth. But it's kind of funny how things evolve because, now more than ever, we're working with a ton of senior lawyers and firm leaders who are really thinking about what's next, whether it's how to transition their practice or how to preserve what they've built, and also how to create a space for the next generation of leadership. So I'm also seeing many of my long-time professional connections beginning to retire. And so it's made this topic feel even more relevant and personal to me. I'm really excited today to be joined for this discussion by my two colleagues, Michelle Krell. She's our National Director at Life After Law and leads our Vancouver office. She works with firms and organizations across Canada on recruitment, transitions, and leadership strategy. And as well, we've got Pearl Prokosh joining us. She's our National Manager. She's responsible for legal recruitment and business development, as well as transition and leadership strategy as well across Quebec and Ontario. And Pearl also brings a unique perspective in that she's practiced law in LA before moving into legal search for the past 2 decades nearly. So today, we're going to be exploring succession planning in law from a few key perspectives. We are going to cover 4 of the most burning topics that we get asked about. And here's the kicker. Succession planning is not just a firm thing. It is equally critical at the lawyer level as well. We regularly field questions from lawyers about themselves, whether a junior lawyer who's not sure of their legal trajectory or senior partners who are facing upcoming mandatory retirement, as well as the law firms that are continuing to think about continuity and sustainability going forward. So first, what we're going to talk about is why plan and why early planning is so critical for law firms, particularly if you're a smaller firm or a sole practitioner and you're looking to protect your legacy and your team. We're then going to talk about firms and firm size itself and how that really impacts and affects succession planning, how each size category deals with succession planning differently, and how they need to safeguard leadership and client trust. And then the thing that you're all waiting for, the actual plan. So we're going to look at what that plan should be and how you can implement it. You're going to get concrete, actionable steps that you can walk away with today. We're going to ensure that you have an effective succession plan and ultimate firm and client continuity plan that you can really work on for yourself. Our goal is that when you walk away today, making you feel like you're confident in your future. We want you to know that you're going to be going from lawyer to legacy. And then finally, we're going to talk about you as an individual lawyer and how you need to succession plan, succession proof yourself to ensure a long and successful, fulfilling legal career. Then, depending on timing, we're going to open up for a short Q&A session. So feel free to submit any questions that you might have throughout the webinar. And don't worry if we don't get to you live, we will make sure to answer afterwards in our follow-up materials. So I am going to jump right in to something really, really crucial, dealing with timing. The key about succession planning is that it is the timing. And it's so important to do it early, obviously, compared to a last minute scramble. Planning in advance is key. Proactivity is key. Timing is really crucial. Crucial. And my advice is, honestly, the sooner the better. It involves a lot of moving parts when it comes to succession planning, and these things don't usually happen overnight, regardless of what your circumstances are. So it doesn't mean that if you're a second year associate that you need to start drafting a detailed plan now of what you're going to do when you're 55 or 65 or 80. But it does mean that you should start to turn your attention to it. Recognize that it's important and start to make a plan or even a plan for a plan. At its core, succession planning really boils down to a very complex human capital, human resource issue. As lawyers, we are in a service provider business. So where would we be if there were no lawyers? Without any lawyers, really, I mean, that's the end. There's no business at all. There is no law practice. There is no law firm. Take that idea a step further. Where would you be without your full complement of lawyers that you currently need to seamlessly run your existing shop? At what point would your working model begin to fall apart? If you were down 20 lawyers, if you're down 5 lawyers, would losing one single lawyer impact you? A little proactive planning can ensure that that doesn't happen. So, to really understand again why planning is so crucial, consider one question. What if I don't? What if we don't do anything about it? What can go wrong? Think about worst case scenarios. Catastrophize a little bit. Use my regular go to concept. My team hears me say this all the time. What happens if you get hit by a bus? What impact is that going to have on you? I mean, other than the broken bones and, the pain and so forth, but really, how would that impact your team, your firm, your colleagues, your clients, your spouse? For each of you, I know that the answer is going to be different, but the importance of doing it now remains the same. And the type of planning, the timing of the planning, the nature of your plan, all of those things really depend on your own unique circumstances. And timing is also directly connected with the size of your firm and your practice. So, for large firms, succession planning is more of an ongoing type of a process with many, many components as opposed to a specific timeline. It's really meant to be ongoing and forever, allowing those firms to continue for generations to come. And of course, that's drastically different than how a sole practitioner or a small firm would approach succession planning. So I'm going to turn this over to Michelle, and she's going to talk about how firm size affects your succession planning and how each size category of firm can and should go about safeguarding their leadership and their client trust.
Thank you, Randy. That's so informative. We really are seeing impact of firm size on succession planning and a difference amongst firm sizes, not only in the effect of not having a succession plan, like you mentioned, but also in the approach or steps to succession planning. So, just to keep it really simple, as you all probably know, there are really three main categories of firms. We have sort of the sole practitioner small firm, then we get into the medium size, which tend to be regional firms, and then the large national, global, international law firms. And succession planning looks very different for each. However, as Randy mentioned, the common thread for them all is the need to have a plan in place and the repercussions of not having one in place. So we'll start with the small firm solo practitioners. Succession in this case is existential. So without it, the practice ends. Hit by the bus scenario, nobody there to, pick up the file the next day, it's done, it's gone. So what succession plan in the case of smaller firms or sole proprietorships really comes down to is survival. So it's imperative to have a plan in place as these firms run the risk of potentially disappearing overnight without a proper plan. So, there's so many different ways that that can come about. If one partner retires, gets ill, gets in an accident, we also see it with like two partner shops. Even if, one's on the litigation side and one's on the corporate side and one wants to move on, where does that leave the other one? And also, if it's a small firm, not necessarily sole proprietor, what if an associate that's heavily relied upon to run the files leaves? So where are you left with? Can you still run your firm, even one person down? So again, all of these can have a huge and detrimental effect on a small firm and it can, in fact collapse the firm or practice. We've seen it happen. But a key difference between the smaller firms and sole proprietorship and the bigger regional or national firms is really the relationship between the lawyer and the client. So we see that the lawyer client relationship is often more personal. So somebody who, a small business or, an individual who's had a small proprietor as their lawyer, they're they're not so much seeking the brand or the firm name, but they really come to rely on the lawyer themselves. They come to trust them. They sort of have a different sort of personal, interconnected relationship. So this also makes succession planning in a smaller firm unique in that the onus of continuity and client service is really entirely on that lawyer or the partner or the sole proprietor. So again, succession planning imperative to the survival of the firm and the continuity of client service. Now, before getting in, well, we'll get into the mid-sized firms because everyone sort of wants like an action plan going forward. So if you are a small firm, sole proprietor, and you're thinking, oh my God, I never thought about that. I didn't think like, what if I get, God forbid, hit by a bus tomorrow? What is going to happen? Who's going to service my clients? So we're really just seeing four sort of succession planning opportunities, strategies that you could use as a smaller firm. First, is the sale of the firm. So you want to identify another firm to buy your practice. This does not happen overnight. That's why when Randy says it really is imperative to start early, you really have to. There are so many moving parts. First, you have to identify a suitable purchaser that not only wants to buy a practice, your practice, but whose practice and values align with yours, with your clients, with the type of work you're doing, and there has to be that personal fit. Again, we talked about that at that level, it really is a personal relationship between the lawyer and the client. So even if you find a firm that might want to buy your practice, what if the lawyer who's running it isn't sort of a mesh with the clients that you have? It also requires evaluation of the firm. So you've got to get accountants involved. There's number crunching to do. And it usually goes back 3 to 5 years of the firm's revenues. So again, these things you have to get in place. They're timely. Not that it'll take so much time out of your day, but it's just going to take sort of like process to get in place. And those things take time. Um, then the other thing is, are your clients going to follow? So here, so now you found a firm, you've identified they want to buy your firm, that everything aligns, but will the clients follow with the new owner, or are they going to leave for other pastures? So you've got to start looking at client integration with the new firm, and that can be an additional barrier. Then the other option we're seeing for, again, we're looking still just at the small firms, is the successor approach. So someone, whether internal to the firm, so a senior associate or a partner who's more at the junior level, or external to take over and continue the firm as it is, but without the senior partner or the sole proprietor there. We again see this with solo and small firms, but you also see that at medium size and large firms as well. You have to identify a trusted peer or junior lawyer and then gradually acclimate the clients to them to that final sort of takeover when the person or leaves or retires or whatever the case may be. And for that, the best case scenario obviously is when the firm has a junior or an associate who's already familiar with the type of work and the client. And then you just slowly bring them on and get them more involved in the files until they eventually establish that trusted relationship with the client and take over. The third is a wind down. So this is usually occurs at a retirement stage, and it's when the partner or partners just want to close up shop. This also requires time and thinking ahead because you have to make sure that your clients are being transitioned properly. So the Law Society has rules around this that need to be navigated. It's more of what's the word? It's more sort of a logistical type of thing. You just have to make sure you've checked all the boxes, that you've given enough notice to your clients, and that clients have a proper plan to move forward so they can have continuity. And then the final one that we're seeing again for the small firms is a merger. So bringing your firm over to another firm, melding the two together. Again, takes time, strategy. It requires identifying a possible target firm that once again are aligned with your practice and also have a need and an interest in merging with your firm. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts of the small firm, why succession planning is so important, because it's to the survival of the firm, and some options of how to go about it. Then we get into the mid-sized firms, which again tend to be regional. They can be national, but we see it more region per region. And this isn't so much existential in that the firm can collapse overnight, although we have seen it. We have examples of that. But it's more sustainability. So protecting the relationships that you have and the financial stability of the firm. So, with medium sized firms, not really having a defined succession plan is a bit less risky in that the firm can absorb a loss of one or two partners if they leave, although it can hit hard, particularly in niche practice areas. Like, for example, if a firm has a family law group and it's a small practice and one or two lawyers leave, you may not have that practice anymore. It doesn't mean that the firm is going to go under, but you may lose out on practice areas that you can't sustain. So, the firm brand and infrastructure at the mid-size level really allow for more stable kind of ongoing continuity. But again, you could lose a practice area. We see it all the time. Or you just want to set up so it is sustainable. So the focus here is on client, few things, client transition. So clients are often tied to certain rainmakers. And when they leave, so too can a client. Succession requires deliberate team based client management. So relationships are spread out amongst lawyers at various levels, right? You don't want them concentrated too junior, too senior. Um, and that's also ties into making sure that you identify junior partners, senior associates, and sort of groom them for the roles or for the transition coming up. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Okay, the next thing is talent pipeline. There has to always be this solid pipeline of upcoming associates and junior partners, like I mentioned. But with mid-sized firms and like large firms, they often lack the deep associate pools of the larger firms. So again, thinking ahead, if you're the managing partner, just making sure that you have at every level people who are moving up the ranks so that when you do get to that stage, there's not a big drop off at the bottom. And then you realize, oh my God, there's this big hole. I don't have anybody who can actually step into the bigger shoes of the senior partners. And then the third,
I don't mean to interrupt. I just had a thought about that actually,
yeah,
Michelle, because as I was saying earlier on, is sort of looking at, I guess, succession planning a little bit as a human capital issue. You don't even have to think about it necessarily as succession planning. It's like your day-to-day planning. It's your staffing. It's your keeping, making sure that you have the right people in place at all the levels in your firm. So, that's part of the reason also, I guess, with the timeliness of it. It's not just succession doesn't just mean 25 years down the road. It's sort of an ongoing process because you always need to make sure you've got the right people in place there as well. So, it's not even, you don't even always have to use the word succession. It's really just, almost call it staffing or keeping your departments of, making sure you have the right level of people all the time.
yeah, which is such a good point because everyone gets nervous when they hear succession planning. It's like another thing to add to my plate. But when you look at a big firm, it's embedded in their models, and Pearl's going to talk more about this too. You have that they put so much effort into summer associates and then the associate program. They're smart. This is succession planning, but still we see like there's a lot of attrition that happens at those lower levels. So you really have to make sure that, like Randy said, like you're always ensuring that a pipeline, somebody leaves, that you have a really good lateral program to bring them in. But again, so it doesn't have to be that scary succession, but it's human capital. And it's just, you see it at different firms, whether, the small one, it's more obvious, and the bigger ones, it's more enmeshed and embedded into their policies and practices. And then one final thing before Pearl's going to talk more about that, what happens at the larger firms. But the last thing is ownership structure. This is applicable both to the medium size and large firms, but there really is a need for clearly delineated partnership structures. Because when you think about it, partnerships and partners are owners. So there's a capital buy ins. And then you have to think, okay, on the other side, there's a buyout or an exit. And that can be complex. So if you don't have a clear retirement and compensation policy, you can face major strain when, let's say, five partners want to leave at the same time. Can you actually afford to give back five buy-ins at the same time? That's when those firms collapse. We saw it with Goodman and Carr. We saw it with Heenan Blakey. That was a huge part of it. It came down to improper succession planning. So again, something you want to get on. It's not as daunting as it may seem. We're going to give you these action steps, and I'm going to let Pearl take it away. Having been at a large firm before and now dealing with them day in, day out, she's really well placed to just talk about that last piece: succession planning in a large firm and action steps for those firms.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Randy and Michelle, for this great overview. Now we're going to talk about the large national firms, as Michelle just indicated. And succession planning at these firms is not as much about survival or sustainability, but much more about longevity and strategy. Large multi-partner firms with institutional clients have a lower continuity risk. Clients see the firm brand as much as the lawyer, if not more than the lawyer. They're more insulated and they're less exposed. In this case, succession planning, as I mentioned, is really about the strategy. You want to position your firm for future growth and leadership and ensure practice growth in emerging industries. The reason is the institutional strength, the cross-office integration, and practice group, which makes succession more seamless. But it still requires planning. You want to really have a strong talent pipeline, a pipeline of junior partners, strong associate pools, structured partnership tracks that provide natural successors. And as we know, and as we see in our day-to-day, retaining top talent is really competitive. You want to also have a reduction or management of associate attrition to retain a consistent pipeline. Client transition plans. There's still a risk if a major rainmaker departs, but institutionalizing clients through client teams and multiple points of contact can really reduce that vulnerability. Also important is governance and policies. This is where formal retirement policies come into play. We see that robust partner compensation systems at the big firms really help manage succession consistently. We often see definitely this attrition that can come into firms at the 3 to 5 year level. So if you're not planning at the beginning, if you're not paying attention at the summer student, the articling student phase, or discussing your lateral hiring need when it's necessary, this can really come back to bite the bigger firms in the end. And that's why, partnering and resorting and, speaking with legal recruitment agencies like us can help you plan and be proactive. The larger firms also tend to have leadership transition committees and processes for grooming their future leaders. So as I mentioned, it really requires planning in the case of mandatory retirement and general attrition. You want to be proactive. You want to ensure that each practice area is robust enough to have a new leader coming up their ranks. When we think about the planning, common approaches can be long-term planning. We're talking 5 to 10 years at a minimum, probably 3 to 5 years. You want to have those leadership succession committees and practice continuity protocols. So just to summarize a bit, as you've listened recently to Michelle and I, about the size of the law firms and their impacts on succession, with the solos, as she mentioned, succession is really existential. Without it, the practice ends. With the regional firm, succession is about sustainability. You want to protect those relationships and the financial stability of the firms. And with the larger firms, succession is about strategy. You want to position the firms for future growth, leadership renewal. Now that we had a chance to really discuss the law firm size and that impact on succession planning, as well as why early planning is so critical for law firm succession, we're going to turn and focus on a broad framework for succession planning and what steps you can take to get your succession plan up and running. Firstly, for implementation of the plan, it comes down to a couple key things: prioritization and a solid action plan. And we know how daunting it can be. You're all so busy in the thick of your practice, the ownership of your firm, trying to service your clients, meet your billable targets. This is where Life After Law comes in. We're going to give you a basic framework on how to succession plan, but what you really should be doing is turning your mind to partnering with an external consultant like us with deep industry knowledge and expertise that can really help guide you through this framework based on your own particular needs, your end game, before you get to that critical stage where it's too late or so much more difficult to plan. So here are some key steps that can be implemented as a very basic framework. Firstly, the very first step, you want to recognize that succession planning is actually needed. Even just coming to terms with the idea that succession planning is necessary can be very difficult. We really see it all the time, particularly with the smaller firms. A lawyer may be, working away and saying, I'll just continue until the wheels fall off. But what if the wheels do fall off tomorrow and you're not ready? What if your star associate leaves, your paralegal retires? What if
Or
a
the
senior
bus,
lawyer departs?
that bus I keep talking about all the time.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it. Like
You know what,
everything
though?
about
One other
us.
thing. Yeah. Well, one of the
I
things
mean,
it's really akin to that always comes down, like you think about a will. Everyone needs one. Everyone knows they need one. It's the last thing you want to do. I'm healthy now. I'm doing this. It's the same with succession planning. It's something that you need to do. You have to do. Just get it over with. At least have it in place because the time you want to do it is now. When you are healthy, when you have your of sound mind, like that's when you want a succession plan and just have it in place. And just for all you lawyers out there, I just thought like it's sort of that same concept. It's something you want to put off, but once you get it done, you just feel sort of a relief.
absolutely. It's such a central part of everything we do, whether we're looking to staff a legal team or succession plan. You really want to be proactive. This is not at all a last minute thing. It's complex, it's intricate, and your whole business, you've invested so much time and energy into it. So planning for that next phase is so critical. And even as practitioners themselves, you want to reflect on where you see yourself. Where do you want to be in 5, 10, or 15 years? Do you want to stay in law? Do you actually want to become a partner? When are you looking to retire? So that really brings me to the next point, timing. You really want to work backwards from the potential end date. What is the ideal timeline? Are you or the partners in your team seeking to retire in 10, 15, 20 years? As I mentioned a few moments ago, you need to start planning several years in advance. Again, probably minimum 3 to 5 years, and it can be closer to 10 years. You then want to identify and explore your options. Are you looking at your potential successors or teams of successors? Are you mentoring, investing, and training them, developing their skills? If you're a solo or a smaller firm, you're looking at various options. Are you looking at a merger or a sale, and with whom? You want to make sure you have alignment with the core firm values, the culture, the compensation models. And at the right stage, you want to involve your clients, keep them informed, be transparent, but make sure this is timely, not too premature, not too late. And most importantly, you want to outsource. Most effective and efficient way is to contact a recruiter for a chat about your options. Recruiters, Life After Law in particular, can really assist with succession planning. We can strategically align with lawyers and law firms to help them in this next phase and assist them in finding the right person and the right plan for your particular needs. We know the market and the landscape. We speak to lawyers all the time at various firms. Our knowledge provides us with a unique lens to see the big picture and to help firms work through the process. We deal with your most important asset, which is your people. So, really, the earlier you start, the more time and more options you'll have. Slowly and methodically, you want to work towards your goal and your timeline. These small bite-sized investments will pay in dividends, and a clear plan and steps towards this stage will be invaluable. So now I'm going to turn it back to Randy, who's going to talk about succession planning from the individual lawyer's perspective.
Thank you so much, Pearl. And I mean, those are amazing, amazing steps to take for anybody who's thinking about this. And I'm starting to get an idea of maybe starting to use the wording, not just succession planning, talking about career planning, talking about business
Mhm.
planning, and maybe different words will make it less daunting sometimes. And I just had another thought as well. We've all, each of us has spoken about different topics, but we've all talked about the timing and how crucial it is. Of course, start as soon as you can. That's always going to be my advice. The sooner, the better. Um, on the other side of things though, like if you haven't yet, it's not too late. Like
For
just
sure.
start now. You haven't missed the boat on it. You don't have to say, okay, forget it. I didn't do this, 10 years ago, so I'm not going to start now. So, I don't want to leave you being scared that, oh no, what's happening now? I left it till, it's too far gone. Just start now. Call us if you are wondering like what the next thing is that you can do, and we'll help you figure it out from where you are in your particular situation. Um, but I want to just look at how this actually impacts on individuals. So, we've talked about it a lot from the sizes of the firms and, how the succession plan impacts on that. But a succession plan or a lack thereof can really, really impact not just the firm itself, but it can have an impact on the individual lawyers. And similar to with law firms, all lawyers, depending on their circumstances, are going to be impacted differently, depending on their unique scenarios. So I'm going to just give you an illustration. So I guess as a good example would be comparing two different levels of lawyers. So I'm going to look at the impact of things at two opposite ends of the spectrum. So let's look at associates who are early on in their law careers and then compare that with a senior lawyer, maybe who's facing a mandatory retirement. So, for a junior or mid level lawyer, the nature of a firm's succession plan can also be really, really impactful on your own career. Think about that small firm owner who, was discussed just earlier. What if they just decide they're done? They're going to close their doors without any notice. Or, that bus, if it comes rolling down the street, they not only is their firm done, but what happens to their teams? Like, what happens to you? It could potentially be leaving you high and dry. It can be leaving you scrambling for a new job. And it happens more often than you might think. So, as a recruiter, one of the things that I always like to think about, and I talk to any of the candidates, young lawyers that we work with when they might be considering joining a small firm, a small practice, I encourage them to ask a lot of questions. Inquire about the firm's long-term plans and goals, because depending on what those answers are, that firm may become less appealing or potentially even more appealing to that associate. On the one hand, depending on those answers, an associate might learn, they might be worried they might not have a job in a year or two. They may be concerned that there's a lack of mentorship in that particular firm, and they might not see a clear career path laid out in front of them there. On the flip side, especially in the current hiring climate, every firm's looking to differentiate themselves, looking to attract top talent, the best talent. Having a thoughtful and transparent succession plan can really be used to the firm's advantage in one way to actually attract new talent. It can be viewed by a potential lawyer as a benefit. They might now be able to say, wow, I can envision myself joining this firm and I see a clear career path ahead of me. So if you're a young associate in this scenario, I guess what I would say is just it's never too early to start to think about your future anytime that you're really considering a job decision. You should always be thinking about where can this go? What can happen? What do I need to make sure doesn't happen? And what do I need to make sure I'm getting set up for? Now,
Can I jump in for 1 second?
yeah, for sure.
Because I'm sure both of you are finding that when you speak to a lawyer who's junior, 2 to 3 years at a bigger firm, they're just so focused on getting the summer job and so focused on getting hired back in articles and so focused on becoming a junior associate. What happens when there's no need anymore, or they don't always think about, do I want to be a partner? This is the trajectory. And if I do, what is the path? Is it 10 to 12 years? Is it 3 to 5, or is it never? So you may want a big firm, but it may not have everything you want in the end. You may want a small firm, but that may not have what you want in the end. So you have to look at it as a whole and early on. Not that you have to decide right away, but just have some sense, like either rule out whether or not you want partnership track and then take it from there, or rule out whether or not you want to be in litigation or solicitor side and then take it from there. It's just a lot of people don't think about the 3 to 5 to 7 years.
Yeah,
That's
and
great. Oh, I was just going to add
yeah,
one little point. Sorry.
yeah, go
Just
ahead.
touching on what you both said and what Randy was saying as well, the succession plan can be very key to a more junior lawyer as they're trying to understand the whole career path and trajectory, because, we have to help guide them, or they're trying to assess, is there room for me at the top? What is the path to partnership? Is it a two-step, a one-step? Is there going to be room in 10 years, in 30 years? So all of it is very relevant and pertinent at all various stages of someone's legal careers. So we have to look at this whole plan, and not just succession plan, as Randy was saying, maybe to broaden the terminology, but it's critical even to junior lawyers as they really try to understand and differentiate the firms one from the other that might seem a little bit blurry to them at first when they're still in law school and trying to understand the lay of the land. But all these nuances can be so critical and relevant as you're trying to recruit and retain that top talent.
Yeah.
And what I was going to also say about that, that's just really, really interesting. I'm sure both of you will echo this. Um, how many lawyers have you spoken to that somehow, they end up coming in and talking to us at, let's say, year 5 to 7, and saying, I've never really thought about my career before. I went to law school and I got hired for a summer job, and then I got hired back as an articling student, and I worked there, and now I'm just still there, and there's been no time to even think about anything else. So they often don't even turn their mind, like forget about succession planning and those words, but they don't even turn their mind to career planning. Like they don't think about it. It just kind of happens. So, I'd like to tell everybody, no matter where you are, just like think about your career, if nothing else, if even if that's your smallest starting point, just think one day, one day we're going to be like nearing the middle or the end of our careers. What might that look like? Just to give it some thought. So as long as it's just like always somewhere in mind
Yeah.
with any of the decisions you make, then at least you can try to keep on track. You can change tracks along the way. Like that happens all the time. People think they want one thing, they go in a different direction. That probably stands true for at least the three
All
of
of
us
us.
here as
Yeah,
well.
that's what I was thinking. Yeah. And it also segues nicely into what you were going to say. So you started off by saying, okay, let's look at juniors, but let's look at the other end of the spectrum. What are you seeing happening now, Randy? Like with the older lawyers, the mandatory retirement type
You know
lawyers?
what? It's so interesting because obviously I think everyone would agree that things today are not what they used to be years ago. People are not automatically, retiring at 65 or 55 even. But and this is true in law and also outside of law. As an employee in general, in most cases, you can't be sort of legally forced out of your employment just because of how old you are. But we've been talking to a lot of senior partners in law firms, and they are not technically employees, and they've also already agreed by contract, albeit probably years ago, but they've already agreed to accept their firm's mandatory retirement policies. And most firms actually have mandatory partnership retirement policies. So listen, if you get to that point and you're ready to hang up your robes and head to Costa Rica, it's easy. Enjoy, have a great time. We don't need to worry about it. You're good. But if you're not ready yet to stop working, like you have to think about it. What happens next? So we talked to a lot of lawyers, and I'm told by many, they've passed their official end dates at the firm that they're at, and often they get granted extensions and then they get another extension. But what we do know is it doesn't continue indefinitely. So plans have to be made at that point and decisions need to be made. And what that looks like, again, with all firms, with all individuals, it really just depends on the scenario that you're in. Each firm handles it differently. Some firms really, really have built-in structures as far as how they deal with mandatory retirement. So in the way that many firms are, very, very structured in their career paths, there's associates and then there's income partner and then equity partner and so forth. A lot of firms will have a clear post-retirement type of a path, so of counsel or whatever they call it. And this would help and really allow more of a seamless transition within the firm for anybody who is facing that mandatory retirement. Firms, we find in general, whether at this stage or at any stage, in fact, firms that have adapted to the needs of their people tend to maintain their people and they keep good people. And that, again, being in a service business, that's what it's really all about at the end of the day. Um, you know, when there's a good program in place, we find at a firm for retiring out lawyers, they're more likely to keep this talent. And that in turn means maintaining those lawyers' clients. That's got to be beneficial to the firm. Not to mention that, they get to maintain that high level of experience that these people have of building a career for many, many years and invaluable mentorship, which is again another key piece. It's crucial in the whole succession planning picture. What I've found, though, it's interesting from talking to some of these lawyers that are approaching is that of counsel or that path isn't always perceived the same way by the lawyers themselves, by others at the firm. There might be concerns about what if I now lose that senior partner title? How are my clients going to react to that? How would they perceive that? My colleagues? It can disrupt, I guess, the status at the firm in a way. It impacts on compensation for sure. And overall, even just that general sense of being valued. And I have to say, I know senior partners, and I've spoken to many who would never consider staying at their current firm once they've retired. So for those lawyers, they feel that it's better for them to move on somewhere else. So we look at that and we think like, okay, if you're one of those lawyers and your firm's really not set up in a way that's inviting you to stay, as with any career planning, my advice would be don't leave it until the last minute. You know it's coming. So start to give some real thought to what you see for yourself down the road. So how do you envision the next stage of your professional life? Are you envisioning yourself working, the same number of hours you're doing now? How many more years do you envision? Do you have clients? Would they stay with you and follow you if you left and joined another firm? Do you even want to continue at a law firm at all? We see many lawyers using this as a great opportunity to try something different. Maybe now is when they decide to try joining a company and becoming an in-house counsel type of a role. Others who've never had the chance decide to hang up a shingle. They might want to practice on their own, full-time, part-time, maybe even taking on project work. There's a lot of options out there for you. But again, regardless of which option might be the best fit for you, there's a common thread. And again, it gets down to planning. So when you work with Life After Law, it's extremely beneficial because we've seen this at so many different levels from so many different angles. But planning your next stage and then helping you market yourself is really, really important. So we can help you identify what are your potential options, help narrow them down, help really develop your value proposition, and we can even reach out to select places on your behalf. So I think, summing up a little bit of all of the succession planning approaches and models that we've talked about, whether for individuals, for firms, they're big transitions. Some of them are huge transactions. They take time, they take effort, they take a lot of thought and a lot of planning in advance. The bottom line is, we've all said it, I'll say it again. Start early, plan, make it a part of your daily business routine. Always turn your mind to it a little bit and things will go much smoother. We have been at Life After Law at the forefront of succession planning and career planning. We have guided many firms and many individuals in each of these scenarios through this is the part when I always mess up the words, successful succession planning, my tongue twister of the day. But we've helped many individuals and firms through this, helping them plan to ensure continuity of their firms, of their practices. And also, by getting us involved, we can help you as the lawyer free you up so that you can do what you do best. Let us help take this piece off of your plate. So, I think now that I'm looking, we have a few minutes left for a couple of questions. Pearl or Michelle, do one of you want to pick one of our questions and jump in?
I can go if you like. I see one question came in from a senior lawyer from a large firm. Basically, what are the biggest mistakes firms can make when it comes to planning or not planning for leadership transitions? So, great question. Some of the key mistakes that law firms can unfortunately make regarding succession planning is, we've covered a bit of it, basically not to plan at all, to get so consumed with your work, your day-to-day requirements, satisfying your client needs that they really ignore this key component of the practice that is really required for the success of the firms, or that they just wait way too long and then you try to scramble at the end with succession planning. The unexpected can happen, as we all know. So really, you don't want to leave this or ignore this key concept. Another issue can really be just not really having much of a formal plan or being very vague either. Other issues can be ignoring the cultural fit and different values and expectations that can emerge, between retiring partners and junior partners and senior associates, as they may have different perspectives, different work styles, different aspirations. I mean, the world has evolved. We have baby boomers, approaching retirement. So we're in a different world at this time. Frameworks are different, and all of that needs to be taken into account. As we mentioned earlier as well, sometimes, not investing enough in proper leadership development, talent pipelines, and mentoring. So really, as we've been mentioning throughout, you really want to be proactive on your hiring needs, proactive on your succession planning, investigating what is really needed and building out those pipelines and teams so you have an emerging pool of successors. Another issue can be just ignoring the emotional factors or the human component. We're dealing with people. It
Yes.
can be very sensitive for a senior lawyer, who ultimately is facing retirement, and it can be difficult, or having to transition that book of business, and the more junior partners or senior lawyers coming up. So we really have to recognize we're dealing with human beings and be sensitive to that. Openness, transparency, all of that is key in the process as well. So these are just a few significant issues that we would definitely recommend highlighting, and can sometimes get sidelined or ignored, unfortunately, as people might, occasionally scramble to deal with a succession planning scenario.
Thanks, Paul. Michelle, do you want to answer one of our questions?
Yeah, I got a question, a great question from a sole practitioner saying, I know you don't want me to be nervous, but I haven't really thought about this. And what do I do? What are the steps? And so, like we spoke about, I think, the most crucial for these small firms or sole proprietors is to just wrap your head around it. Like what Randy said, what do you want in the end? Do you want to wind down? Do you still want to practice? What happens if you get injured? The first thing I see, it took me like 2 years, I think, with one of our clients for them to just get their head around that, oh my God, this is something I have to do and I have to carve out a little bit of time, especially with those small firms where it really is up to them. If they're not billing, the money's not coming in. So it's something that you have to build into your day, but it doesn't have to take a lot of manpower to do it. But the first step is just wrapping your head around it, seeing what your possible options are, aligning with us, having a call, just, where do I go from here? It's always nice to talk to somebody who's been through it, who's done it, and can kind of guide you through the process. So it's not, don't be scared, but just pick up the phone, call. We walk through sort of what your end goal is, or where you see yourself, or how you would set it up if you weren't able to, if there is no end goal, but if something happens in an interim. And then just kind of take it from there and figure out the steps, and get you all set up and feeling confident about possible scenarios that you have, that you can explore, that you have available to
Yes, we're not scary. We can help make this.
And
We
it's
can
never
help.
too late, I think, as Randy said also. Yes, we're
Yeah.
encouraging early planning, but look, when you partner with someone that has experience and expertise, regardless of the stage, and if you're at the very end of your career path, just consult with an expert. We can, listen, map out, see where you're at, and provide that, market knowledge, decades of experience in different facets of recruitment, and, help you strategize.
you.
Yeah. I'm going to just answer another question that I see here. It's from another senior partner, getting a number of those today. How much in advance of my mandatory retirement date should I start thinking about what's next? I know I'm not going to be anywhere close to wanting to stop working, but what's a realistic lead time? I'm not really sure.
Great
I'm not really
question.
sure how I feel about going out to look for a job at this stage. Am I talking years or months in advance? That's a great question because yeah, like being a senior partner at a firm, you haven't had to look for a job for probably, probably possibly since again you were a summer student, maybe you've been at the same firm for your entire career. So completely understand that being a daunting task and not wanting to have to get started on that, and also not wanting to, not wanting to have to do it way in advance because you're still wanting to stick it out to where you are until the very end. So one of the things I would say, I'll repeat it again, it's never too early to start. Doesn't mean you have to do anything yet as far as, actively applying for a job per se. Just start a conversation, develop a relationship with your recruiter because once we know you, even if it's 3 years in advance or a year in advance, we know what's going on in the market. So sometimes an opportunity may present itself without you looking for it. Often that's how it actually happens. All of our discussions, I think this is also really important to point out, are completely confidential. So I will not be running off to your firm saying, oh, so and so is leaving. Nobody's talking about you that way. You can talk to us. We understand the sensitivity of it, and it never goes beyond us as your audience, but we're able to talk you through it, start thinking about what it might look like. So then down the road, if we have an idea, we might reach out to you and say, hey, something like this just came up, or we're learning about a new structure that this type of a firm is implementing, and we can have conversations. So no time is too soon. If you start thinking about it a year or two beforehand, that's great. When you're in that final year, when you know your actual end date is coming close, then we can start coming up with more of a concrete plan that has like a timeline attached to it and say, okay, let's work backwards. You need to leave by here, which means you need to secure something by this date. And we can actually start to lay out more of a specific detailed timeline of what that plan might be. But again, never too soon. And I'm going to say it's never too late. So, if your mandatory retirement is happening next month, call, we can still help you. And we can work with you in whatever situation that you are currently in. I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm going to just cut off our questions now. Again, I mentioned earlier that anyone that we didn't get to, we will send them out after along with a copy of today's recording. So thank you so much, everybody who joined us today. Special thank you to Michelle and Pearl for sharing your insights and your years and years of experience. I can say today's conversation has shown that succession planning isn't just about the transition, it's about your legacy. Whether you're part of a large firm, preparing for the next generation of partners, a small practice looking to protect what you've built, or you're a senior lawyer, planning your next chapter, having a strategy in place ensures continuity, confidence, and peace of mind. At Life After Law, we are always here to help you and think strategically about what comes next for your firm, for your team, for your own career. We encourage you to continue the conversation with us. You can connect with us on our website at lifeafterlaw.com. You can reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. And again, we will be sending out a copy of today's session so that you can review and revisit any key takeaways. Please feel free to share it with your colleagues. And thanks again for joining us. We look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you.